Get yourself in the lotus position, because I've got no plan, no pretense, and definitely no bypassing. I'm Josh Connolly, and this will probably be dysfunctional. So buckle up, because today I'm going to take you on a very vulnerable journey. If you listened last week, the amazing episode with Leona, you'll know that we are now getting guests on the podcast. But on the 14th of May, which will be 2 days after I record this, the day after it comes out, I will celebrate 13 consecutive years of sobriety. And so it becomes a very, very reflective time for me. And I thought what I would do today is take you on the journey of how I found myself becoming somebody who's sober and what my sober journey has looked like and how I've got to where I am today, 13 years sober. And I'll talk about a bunch of different things and how I view sobriety and stuff like that. And I guess what I would say before I go into that is that I think it's great that sober communities exist in the way that they do now. They didn't exist when I got sober. And I think it's great that so many more people are finding sobriety. But I'm not somebody who stopped drinking for a lifestyle choice. And I think there are a lot of people now that do that stop as a lifestyle choice, so that they can optimize who they are. That really isn't what I did. All right, I consider myself to be an alcoholic. That's the terminology that I would use for myself. An addict, whatever however you want to term it like that. But I'm not somebody who, for me, drinking had just got a little bit out of hand. I think it's important for me to say that. And I think it's important to make that distinction between the things. So yeah, I want to talk about it. I could get very vulnerable here. Because I want to tell you about the lows and how low they were, because I do think that people that have met me in my sobriety, or people that have started following my work or know me now, have no idea, perhaps, of how bad things were for me, and how I have to stay vigilant. I'll tell you right now that I still have to work on my recovery. I still go to meetings at least once a week in order for me to maintain my sobriety. So look, I actually found cannabis before I found alcohol. I found cannabis, I reckon, when I was about 12 years old. 12, maybe going on 13, but certainly young. And I remember falling in love with it, man. I remember it being one of the most amazing discoveries of my life. And I think it's important to say this, because what you're going to find out and what I want you to understand is that the way that I used alcohol and drugs was an attempt at a solution. It wasn't my problem. And so for a short period of time when it worked, look, I'm thankful that I found alcohol and drugs when I did find them. I even look at some of my children who struggle now. And my biggest fear is that they're going to find it. And when they do, they're going to fucking love it in the way that I did. Because it did everything that I needed. And as somebody that's 13 years sober now, when people ask me, do I miss it? I don't miss what I was, but I fucking miss being able to take some sort of substance, be it a pint glass of liquid or a fucking smoke that settles the mind instantly. And I know these sober influencers out there want to say, don't settle the mind and all that shit. Scientifically, it doesn't reduce stress. It just makes you think you reduce. I don't give a fuck about science. Let me be clear about that. In these instances, when we're talking about human experiences and consciousness, I don't give a fuck about what science says. Alcohol and drugs worked for me. And there's a lot of arrogance in some of these like influencers out there that are like trying to optimize sobriety, fucking capitalize on it, and just, you know, shame alcohol as if it fucking don't work. Mental. And so my love affair began first with cannabis. Actually, it was resin when we were kids. So it was like solid resin. We used to smoke bong down the park, loads of us, a group of us. And a bong's like a water pipe, if you don't know what that is. Gives you like a larger hit. Smoking weed, like cannabis, sort of bud. I don't know what terminology they'd use today. But like that wasn't really a thing back then. In fact, I remember when it came out, we used to buy a tenth of this solid stuff. And yeah, my love affair began with it. You know, I smoked cannabis. I mean, give or take days here and there, every single day until I got sober when I was 24, 13 years ago. Every single day, including holidays. I remember going to like Egypt or fucking Tunisia or something like that and walking the streets and I did, to find somebody to sell me some smoke. And I can see, by the way, today, I can see the way that my mind is and how difficult it can sometimes feel to be in my mind with it moving so quickly and such big emotions all of the time that I bounce between. I can see, and still today, I think to myself, this is genuine. I have moments when I think like, maybe I would be a better person if I started smoking cannabis again, because I would have that release. And this is something that I would argue. I talked to my brother-in-law who doesn't smoke weed, but he likes a cocktail, likes a drink now and then. And he's like, you know, I know it's unhealthy and stuff like that, but I sort of say to him, I would argue the fact that you have that release, that kind of instant release, and he has a healthy relationship with it, right? He's not misusing it. He's just all fucking, which is possible. And I know people in early recovery don't want to believe that it is possible, but it is possible to have like a much healthier relationship with something that ultimately, if you have too much of it, is not very good for you. And I sort of argue that the release and stuff that he gets from it, and then I have to be stuck with this fucking stress and tension in my body as much as I do. Like, you know, the net positive, you know, you could argue on from a health perspective. I ain't a fucking doctor, am I? I don't. It's crazy that I need to say that, but I'm not. You could argue that, like, you know, the net benefit's better for him. But yeah, the love affair began, and you know, I found alcohol when I was like 13 or 14, and I think that, man. You know, I'd lost my dad when I was younger. I knew that my dad was an alcoholic. And I remember so clearly thinking to myself, when I found alcohol, I just got to make sure that I don't get addicted to this. And life might be all right, man. I mean, I really found myself when I found alcohol. And then simultaneously began to lose myself. And that's the great paradox of which there are many of addiction. But the weekends were amazing. You know, you'd finish school and then the weekend would come and you'd get drunk. You know, we used to drink. I used to put vodka in Cherryade, and then it was vodka in Blue Wicked, and vodka in Coke, and you'd just get it down your. And then we'd have shit mix. Does anybody, if you used to do shit mixes? Which was, I mean, I never did them from my house because I think, I don't know, I was too scared, or I don't know. But people would bring out like a little, you know, like a little water bottle, and it would just have little bits from like every alcohol in their parents' cupboard. We called it a shit mix, and you'd get that down you. Fuck, man, we were so young. We were so young looking back now when I compare it to my kids. Wow. And then harder drugs followed. I mean, the first harder drugs that followed for me were ecstasy, pills. Be honest with you, I loved pills, man. I loved taking so many that if you took enough, when you were coming down, you would trip out. You wouldn't know where you were. And I used to love tripping. Got into acid then as a result of that, and magic mushrooms and stuff like that. And my favorite thing was to like completely lose a sense of who and where I was. And that makes sense. That makes sense now when, you know, even as I say it, I used to love taking the right amount of concoction of drugs to lose a sense of who and where I was. And still today in my life, I often struggle with who and where I am. And so like when you look at the correlation of these two things, like it makes perfect sense that I fell in love with these things. It makes perfect sense that I had the relationship with alcohol that I did. And look, you know, my alcohol and drug use started as being like, feeling like there was little or no consequence to it. I remember being sick for the first time. Could never drink lager, believe it or not. Never drank lager or beer. I think my first experience of being sick was on Red Stripe lager. And I drank, I don't know how many cans, but I drank them quickly. And then I was sick and I woke up in a bush and it was crazy, man. And I never drank lager again. I don't think it was just that moment. I think the smell of lager had always, you know, what I grew up with, I think it sort of had a bit of an impact on me that I couldn't get over. So I drank cider. Which is, you know, it's not like I picked a healthy alternative. I drank cider. And I remember the first time I blacked out, I was at a friend's house who was like my best mate at the time. I say my best mate, he was like my idol. I'm not going to name him for obvious reasons. But I was very close to him, his family. He actually ended up going to prison. I used to go and visit him in prison, and I used to go and visit his little brother and sister and try and be a big brother to them. It's funny, man, when you look back that I was like being of service then as well, you know. I loved him, still love him today. I mean, I haven't seen him for years. See some of his family, but it was at his house that I blacked out. And I remember waking up the next day in my bed and I fucking couldn't remember nothing. I mean, I really couldn't remember nothing. I was racking my brains. I can remember up till 8 o'clock and then I could not remember a thing. This isn't like, and I didn't realize until later on in my drinking life that most people don't black out. A lot of people say they black out, but they don't actually black out in that way where I could remember up to a certain time and then not remember nothing at all after. I mean, and the reason I like found out and realized that people don't do that is because I used to like, when I started drinking in pubs, we'd go out of an evening and the next day I'd be like, I fucking don't remember nothing from last night. Like I've blacked out from about 7 and everyone would be like, yeah, same man, don't remember nothing. And then somebody would be like, oh, when we were in that club at like 2, and I'd be like, no, I fucking said I don't remember. I don't remember being in the fucking club. And people would be like, oh, you fucking weren't even that drunk, you know, you must remember that. And I'm like, I didn't, man. I was blacking out regular. And by the way, let me be really clear on this. As somebody who's been around people in recovery, if you are still drinking and you black out a lot, I mean, it's a fucking hallmark. It's a hallmark of somebody that needs to look at their drinking. And I ain't with the like whole everyone should stop drinking, alcohol's a poison, it's bad, I'm fucking better than you because I don't drink. I ain't down with that at all, man. I'm actually more inclined to say if you can have a healthy relationship with alcohol, fucking you should. Because if I could, I would. If I can. But if you're blacking out regularly, man, I would suggest that you explore that. Genuinely would say that. And yeah, but I also remember panicking when I woke up after that blackout. Yeah, I'm maybe 14 now, and I'm like, fuck, I can't remember. And I remember calling my mate, and I'm stumbling on my words a little bit because I'm making sure I don't say their name. And him and his mum were like, yeah, you were fine. Like you were really out of it, but you were fine. You didn't cause any problems. And I was like, fucking hell. And then I remember thinking, I fucking can't wait to do that again. I cannot wait to do that again. And maybe in some ways that's what separates me from normal people, is that I fucking loved it. I loved it. I loved losing nights. I loved being so out of my head. Interesting term, which I'll talk about in a second. I loved being so out of my head that I had no idea what was going on. I fucking loved it. I lived for it. And intentionally drank and drugged my way into that state as often as I could. I mean, I got some tales of what it was like when I was drinking and using drugs in that way. And I don't even know if it's appropriate. I don't know if it's appropriate to tell some of them. Maybe that's for another podcast. If you're listening or you're watching on YouTube, let me know. Maybe I'll do the tales one day. I'm going to tell you some of them. I just don't know if I should tell you them once. But that term, out of your head, again, it makes perfect sense that I was trying to get out of my head all the time. I'm still trying to get out of my head today. I'm just doing fucking saunas and breathworks and ice baths, because my head's not an easy place to be, man. And these things like breath work and stuff like that work, and I've done a lot of work on myself. But I gotta be busy, because if I slow down, man, and I'm in my head, it's not the ideal place for me to be. That's just my reality. So it makes sense that I was trying to get out of my head all of the time, yeah. And like I say, even as somebody that's sober now, not a great deal has changed on that front. So look, when I left school, I got involved I was selling drugs maybe by like 14, 15, class A drugs, but mainly cannabis. And I was kidnapped when I was about 15. I used to sell drugs for these bunch of lads that used to come from London, and they would call it county lines now, right? But back then they used to come from London. They would like give me weed, and I would sell it for them. And they made you really feel like somebody. And it's important for me to say that, like, I learned a lot about true community in the park. I learned a lot about looking out for people. I learned a lot about like purpose and like giving myself meaning in my life and feeling like I wanted to go somewhere in my life. That came down the park, man, because I always felt dysfunctional. Yeah, I always felt like I didn't really fit in with the societal norms, and so I fit in down the park. And then I had these people to impress, and I think it's important for us to understand that, like, I gave them a lot of loyalty. I've always had like a deep loyalty in my own dysfunctional ways, in many ways, I gave these people my loyalty. And I remember once I was coming back from my girlfriend's. I must have been about 15, walking down the road, and they rang me because mobiles were just coming in then. Like on my 3310 or whatever the fuck it was, my Sony Ericsson. And they said, "Where are you?" And I said, "I can't come. I'm with my parents at the moment, so I can't come and meet you." And they came out from around the corner, and they'd been watching me. And they bundled me in the car, and they were like, "Don't fucking ever lie to us again. Don't you ever lie about where you are when we phone you again." And that was like clever manipulation, yeah, because it meant that whenever they rang me, I had to tell them where I was. And then so there was this other time once I was walking home from my girlfriend's again. She used to live in Upper Stratton, and I was there a lot. Upper Stratton is the place where I grew up. I was walking home from there once. They phoned me and said, "Where are you?" So I told them. They got me in the car. Now, I lived about like 2-hour drive from London, yeah. Straight up the M4. And they got me in the car. They had loud music on. There was one in the back, sat in the back with me, and two in the front, obviously one driving. And they were like, you're going to London, bruv. You're coming to London. And I remember I was like, I can't fucking come to London. Right? I can't. I got school in the morning. My mum will be worried about where I am. She'll like sound the alarm. It's not good if we do that. They're like, you're coming to London. You're going to meet the elders. And as we went to go and get on the motorway, they got out of the car and started dancing, right? They had fucking Dizzy Rascal blaring out of the car. Or something alike, right? And they were like dancing around the car. And I was like thinking, I need to fucking run, right? But I can't run. If I run, they'll catch me and then I'll be the kid that I just can't run. So I stayed in the car. And they got back in the car and they started driving towards London. So we were heading towards Reading, right? Which Reading's about 40 minutes down the road from me. They came off the junction at Reading and started dancing around the car again. And I'm fucking scared. I'm not getting out at Reading. I got nowhere to go. I just got to stick to this, right? I'm gonna have to stick to it. So I stayed in the car, and then they drove. When they got back on the motorway here, they started heading back towards Swindon. I'm thinking, well, I don't know what's going on here. And they was like, don't worry, he's going to come to Swindon, bruv. He's going to meet you in Swindon. He's on his way here. They got out of the car once more as we got back into Swindon and danced around the car. And their mood had sort of changed a little bit by then. And I was fucking really scared. I'll tell you the truth, right? I thought if I get up and run, I might wet myself. I was really worried about wetting myself because that's how scared I was. They got back in the car. Anyway, they took me to an industrial estate then. And they got me out of the car. They put a bag over my head. Not before I watched them put a pool cue together. And they got a bag out of my head. And then they put something to the back of my head that they said was a gun. To be clear, I never saw the gun. And they started walking me up into this shrubbery up where we were going. And they were talking about what they were going to do with my body. One of them was saying, just dab him and leave it here. The other one was saying, no, we'll put it in the car and dash it on the way back. So I'm thinking I'm dead. They're going to kill me, right? I really believe they were going to kill me. And they took me up into the bush and basically they counted down from 3. And when it got to 1, I thought, that's it, bang, I'm dead. And they ripped the bag off my head and just started dancing. I was like, what the fuck? And then they were like, mate, you wouldn't have called me mate, bruv, you passed. Nobody ever passes the test. We try this with everybody. Every time we get out of the car, everybody runs. You fucking never ran. We tried to get out 3 times and you never ran. And then they took me for a kebab. And basically what they were saying was, it was like an initiation to see if I had what it takes to sell stronger drugs. Now, I know now, having done some work with the police, with a lot of the work that I've done, that that's all a tactic, right? It's all a tactic to manipulate you into coercively get you to feel like you've had an initiation to be part of the gang, right? They know you're not going to fucking run. But like I say, I went to school the next day and I felt like a fucking Tony Montana. And I laughed now, but I did, man. Like when I was 15, I thought I will sell drugs. And I'm going to be like Tony Montana. I used to watch Scarface. If you haven't seen it, he becomes a big cocaine dealer. And I thought that's what I would be when I was older. That's what I had aspirations to be like when I was older. Crazy, man. I was very fortunate, really, that those people, they ended up going to jail, a lot of them to prison. And so I managed to get out of that gang. Again, we never called it a gang, but I managed to get out of that and, moved on and the drug dealing never really left. I always was selling some kind of drugs to make money, for my own supply. And I left school. I was 15 when I left school and never really got a proper job. Bummed about, worked like labouring, hod carrying on building sites and stuff like that. And lived for the weekend. Go clubbing Thursday, Friday, Saturday, Sunday. I used to go out on my own. I used to go down into town. It would be load. You'd always see people out that you knew, but I would go out on my own. I used to drink half a litre of vodka before I went out with Coke. Me and a friend of mine, we used to often meet before we went out, and we'd buy a litre of vodka, and you would have it in a pint glass with a dash of Coke in the top just to take the sting out of it. And you'd basically just try and neck it as quick as you could so that you didn't have to spend too much money when you're out. And we would get battered. I mean, truly, truly drunk. Blacking out regularly, waking up, not knowing where I'd been, what had gone on. I mean, it was crazy. But it was easy to blend in, right? That wasn't too weird to be like that. It wasn't seen as too strange to be like that. Like, I was just a party animal, right? And we loved it. And you know, I would go to raves, and there was lots of ecstasy. Was huge when I first started going out. Everybody was taking ecstasy, and lots of it. And I got myself in some states. There were times when, I really felt like I was gonna die. There is the food van. Before I carry on, let's wait. I always say I never edit this, so we're gonna wait. I fucking hate the food van, man. Always. I've been recording the podcast later purposely because of this. There you go. Maybe I should edit that out. Nah, fuck it. I said I'd never edit this. So yeah, and so I lived for that, I lived for going out. I was still living at home, obviously. I started going out when I was like 16, 17. We'd get in a lot of fights. Would get beat up a lot because I was little, very little. I was like 5 stone lighter than what I am now. And for people outside the UK and don't know what stones are, I can't convert that for you at all. I was just skin and bone. But it was weird, man, because when I got when I got beat up bad, and this is crazy, man, but I fucking loved it. I loved it. I'd get beat up and beat to a pulp and knocked out. I remember once I woke up in a bush and I'd been hit with a knuckle duster, and it turned out it chipped my eyebrow bone. The growth on my face from this thing was crazy, and I ended up in hospital, and they kept me in overnight doing checks. And I remember, like, I never thought, fucking hell, I better not do that again. I only ever used to think that I fucking loved it. I can't wait to do it again. And then I started pub drinking when I was like 18. And ultimately my first daughter was born when I was 18 years old. And I've talked a lot about the drinking here, but by now at 18 years old, when I was sober, I was always down, yeah. I knew that I sort of struggled with life, but before I had kids, before I had anyone to look out for, it was just me. And so it felt like it fucking didn't matter. Like, I found ways to make money, to get by. Like, I was racking up debt. Back then, I don't know what it's like now, but as soon as you turned 18, you had fucking letters through the letterbox from credit card companies. I remember the first credit card company that wrote to me when I was 18. I didn't have a fucking job, mind. Didn't have a job. Wrote to me at 18. I had a credit card for £2,000, like that. And then, by the way, they fucking wrote to me, the credit card company, and were like, oh, if you're struggling for cash, here's a check. Fucking write on it, and we'll take it out of your credit card and put it into your bank so you've got cash, and obviously we'll charge you a shit ton of interest on it. And I did it. I remember I wrote, I think I had fucking 1,800 quid that I could do, and I wrote it, put it in my bank, and I was away. We used to have payday loans, and there was something called the Money Shop in the town centre, and if you went in there and wrote them a cheque for £500 from your bank, they would give you £425 cash. So I used to do that. I was just racking up debt, but I didn't care. Didn't care that I was racking up debt. And like, I wasn't somebody that who was, taking loans and it was getting out of hand. I was taking them thinking, I don't give a fuck. I've got fucking, with no intention of ever paying it back. I had no intention of ever paying these things back. Like, I didn't care about my life. I'd always joked until I was 18. As long as I live to 18, I don't care. And to get a bit serious with you for a minute, and when I said live to 18, because I wanted my 18th birthday to get wrecked. That's the sort of thing I was. People talk about like suicide ideation and stuff. Like, suicide never ever felt like anything but a valid option to me. Ever since I could remember, I wouldn't wear a seatbelt in a car because I used to think to myself, I might not necessarily want to kill myself, but if I was in a car that crashed, I mean, that would be a wasted opportunity. So I would not wear my seatbelt, so that there was the chance that it might kill me. And I sort of like, my risk-taking behaviors were a reflection of that. They were a reflection of a lack of care for my life. But by the time I was 18, I remember really feeling like this world is not for me. By the time I was 18, I would say I was suicidal, regularly suicidal, particularly when my daughter was born. And let me be honest with you, I remember holding my daughter for the first time. I was 18, man. I was a child. And I remember holding her in my arms and feeling something that I'd never felt before, and looking at her. And in the back of my mind, I truly thought, you need to get as far away from me as you possibly can, because I will cause you nothing but pain. And I remember the responsibility that I felt all of a sudden. I remember thinking the game's up. I need to sort it out now. I need to like deal with this. I need to step up. And so that's what I tried to do. I got a job in a factory. And I set about trying to show up as a dad, and I fucking couldn't show up as a human, as a man. I couldn't, let alone as a fucking dad. But I got a job in this factory. I had a house, had a mortgage at 18. I mean, that tells you how times have changed, because you could get a mortgage then just working at a factory. And I started to live this life of getting through work. I would work long hours, hard hours. I would work as hard as I can. I'd live still for the pub on a weekend. I didn't show up as a dad. Let me be really, really clear about that. I was not a dad. I didn't show up for my kids. I didn't do what I was supposed to do. I went on in what was a very dysfunctional marriage. And that's a story for another day. But I went on to have 4 children in that marriage by the time I was 24. 2 boys and 2 girls. And I was no dad. Let me tell you that very, very clearly. With all the work that I do in the world today, let me tell you very clearly, I was no dad. And if I had continued on that path and that journey, I was a very wounded, very traumatized, hurt young boy in a man's body. But if I'd stayed like that for the rest of my life, my kids would have had every right to disconnect with me and go and try and live their life. I drank so much, man. I drank so much. I got involved in football violence when I was like 19. So I got kids at home. I'd finish work. We'd travel around the country, getting in fights, and I was in some bad ways, and the relationship that I was in would break down. I would end up living at my mum's for a bit. I would move out and live in a bedsit for a month, and I wouldn't be able to look after myself. The times when I lived at my mum's, to give you some context of how I was living life, I would go in the medicine cupboard and just get any tablets out of there that I could. I wouldn't even read what they were on the box. I couldn't care less. And I would crush them down and use them, sniff them. and drink and go and drink and smoke, and it was bad, man. It was a bad existence, and then go to football and, like, you know, regularly getting arrested, waking up in police cells, and spent a lot of time drunk and disorderly charges and being in police cells at overnight and for petty things. And it was bad, man. It was really bad. And I remember once when I was living at my mum's, and I'd came home one night and I'd taken like a pitiful amount of paracetamol and ibuprofen, I think, that I'd just found. And I woke up and I could remember the next morning, and my tummy was hurting. I sort of had a sense that there was no way that I'd taken anywhere near enough to kill me. But I remember, like, I had to say to my mum, like, how many tablets do you think you'd have to take before you needed to go to hospital? And I remember the fear on her face. Like, why are you asking me that? I'm fucking 20 at the time, 19, 20. So I'd had a few sort of half-hearted, pitiful attempts to end my life. I felt like I fucking didn't have the balls to do it, you know. So I felt like a failure, really. I felt like I was a failure at life and a failure at fucking death as well. And I remember I used to wake up every day, man, devastated that I'd woke up. Like, I was trying to drink myself to death a lot when I was in my early 20s. And I used to have to fucking... By the time I was 24, yeah, the marriage had, like, broken down, and I was living back permanently then. I was on a fold-out bed in my mum's house, in the fucking living room. So I felt like I needed to stay out of the house until everyone had gone to bed. Otherwise I was just in the way, so I would stay in the pub. I would go and just fold this, like, folding mattress on the floor. Put it on the floor, lay on it, and then I would wake up in the morning and have to go to work. And I always held down a job. I did always held down a job. I mean, mainly because I knew that I could, you know, drink in the way that I did if I had money. I just remember times when I used to wake up on that floor I think I can't keep doing this every day, man. I can't keep every day waking up like this. And I just kept going and going. And I think, like, there was a time when I was, there was a series of events that happened. I went to work one Monday and I was loading a lorry, and long story short, I trapped my foot, my left foot. I had steel toe cap boots on, and I trapped my left foot in the tail lift of a lorry. So for anyone that don't know, like, the tail lift is like, if you've ever seen people loading stuff on the back of a lorry, that metal sort of platform that comes down and goes up to the lorry. My foot was hanging over the edge when it went up to the lorry, and it shut fully with my foot in it. And I ended up losing my toes, 3 of my toes on my left foot. So my big toe and the next 2 toes along, they're just stumps now. I got about half a big toe, which is significant enough for it to not mess my balance too much, although I get problems in my back and stuff from it now. But to give you an idea of the kind of life that I was living when that happened, I was on morphine for a week. They were so badly crushed that they were going to have to amputate them. They tried to save them for a week. They couldn't save them. I was on morphine, this morphine drip. I'm texting people going, this morphine's fucking amazing. I really want to try it with cocaine. Can anybody bring up some cocaine so I can try it with this morphine? Of course, everyone was like, no. I had one friend who at the time I lauded as being a proper friend at the time, bought me up some cannabis and said, like, will they let me wheel you out and you can smoke some of that? And he did that. I was off the morphine drip by then, but he did that for me. And And they said after a week, we can't save your toes, we need to amputate them. And they said, you need to come in this weekend. We're going to let you go home, but you come in this weekend and you'll have the surgery to remove them. And I was like, well, I'm not coming this weekend. And they were like, what do you mean? I said, well, I'm away for the weekend, Swindon, playing football, watching them, yeah? Because I used to go and watch them drink all weekend. And they're like, I don't think you understand. Like, you can't go on a drinking weekend. And I was like, well, I fucking am. So you can book me in, but I won't turn up because I'm going. And it was up north. We were going to Blackpool. Accrington away it was. So in the end, they were like, all right, well, we won't book you in then. And we'll book you in for an appointment next week and we'll see where we're at. I went away drinking and drugging on this weekend and my foot was bad. And they basically said to me, look, it's got so bad, your foot now, that this is mad. We won't be able to sort of cut it away in a very healthy way. So your foot will reject your toes in the end and they'll come off. This is fucking mental. Mental to be saying it as I'm saying it. So I had this big bandage on it, and every 2 days I had to go to the doctors to see if my toes had come off. But of course, I'm on all this medication to try and stop infection and all that sort of stuff, but I'm fucking drinking. And I'm not really taking, I think I was taking the medication because they told me that it could make you feel funny. And after a while, I basically, long story short, I got fucking gangrene in my foot. So they said, we need to do emergency surgery. So they did it and I lost it. They amputated my toes. And then I went on this process of like, I was off work for a long period of time. I knew that I spoke to work and I was like, I didn't want to sue my work because it wasn't like they weren't at fault. It was just a fucking total accident. And I could have sued them, but I fucking didn't want to because they didn't feel morally right to do so. But the owner of the company had said to me, look, we can claim for an accident at work. You deserve to do that. I pay high insurance so that if an accident happens that you can claim. So the company actually helped me claim for it. And I was going to get, I'll tell you, I was going to get £20,000 for it. At the time, I was £17,000 in debt. So I was like, fucking, I'm going to be able to sort my life out. So there was that going on. So that happened in September. The Christmas of that year, my foot had got so bad, infected. I had to go back up to the hospital. I went up the hospital on Christmas Eve. I was wearing DAPs at the time. DAPs were fashionable at the time. I had a pair of fucking Primark DAPs. And my foot had swollen over the front of the DAP and I couldn't get it off. So I just left it. And I was so drunk. I remember being thrown out of the hospital, but that's all I can remember. I don't know what I did when I went up there, but they wouldn't see me because I was too drunk. So I left it another day and then I went back and they were like, look, your foot is really bad. And they said to me that you may have infected the bone, but it's so swollen, we can't tell. So we need to get you on an intravenous drip. We need to get this infection down. And then we can't treat an infected bone. So if the bone's infected, we need to cut it off. And I was like, well, how much are you going to have to cut off? And they said, well, that depends how far it's gone. Because once you go past half a foot, then you have to cut off below the knee. And here's where I was at this stage of my life. I'm 23 now. I'm thinking, if they have to cut it off below the knee, I'll get fucking loads of money. And I'll have the best excuse in the world to just drink how I want to drink and people will leave me alone. And every day they would come in and see if the swelling had gone down enough to see if they could check. And anyway, long story short, eventually they checked. The infection went down and the bone wasn't infected. So I didn't lose any more of my foot. But now I had this sort of £20,000 looming over me. The reason I was living at my mum's on a fold-out bed at my mum's house is because I couldn't afford to live anywhere, to pay for the kids and to live anywhere with all the debt that was hanging over my head. So it was this sort of waiting game then. It became, I'll get this money, I'll be able to pay off my debt. And then as a result of paying off the debt, I'll be able to, I don't have to go bankrupt, right? Which is what I would have had to have done. I can pay off this debt and I can find somewhere to live. So yeah, I had that going on. And I remember my best mate, still, one of my best mates in my life today, still meet up with him. I mean, not as regularly as we should. He fucking looked after me, man. I lived at his house with him and his missus at the time, his girlfriend at the time. Bearing in mind I was a fucking drunk, I was a nightmare, and he let me stay there. And I know that I fucking caused their relationship problems because he was letting me live there, and he fucking did until I didn't need to anymore. And he pulled me aside and he said, when you get that money, he said, you won't pay off your fucking debt. He said, I wouldn't be surprised if that'd be the end of you. And I fucking knew he was right, man. Deep down, I was thinking, when I get that £20,000, I'm going to book a hotel room for a week and I'm going to go out in a blaze of glory. And I fantasized about that a lot. So I had that hanging over my head, trying to make my way. 24 now, still fighting at football on the weekends. We went away for, again, it was up north. It was Blackpool again. So whenever Swindon were playing anywhere near, within like an hour of Blackpool, you'd all go up there. You'd do a weekend in Blackpool. You'd go to the away game, and you'd get on it all weekend. And we'd gone up there. I think it was the Saturday of the game, maybe. There's a group of us there, however many lads had gone away. And we was having this mess about food fight in the pub. And I was steaming. It's the morning, right? But I'm steaming. Right? It was lunchtime. I'm not just drunk. I'm drugged out of my head as well, right? Because I had a lot of drugs on me. One of the lads, again, won't say his name. When his food come out, he had cod and chips, right? And I've gone up behind him and picked the plate up and just put it in his face. Of course, the cod's, when cod comes out, it's like hot, innit? Spitting fat. Fucking idiotic, stupid thing to do, right? Stupid, always taking it too far. Story of my fucking life. So he sort of, he's kicked off a bit, right? And I think we're joking, because we're having a food fight, and because I'm so off it, out of my head, I don't know what's going on, right? I think he's joking. So we go out the front at this pub. He said, I think we should take this outside. And I'm like, yeah, let's take it outside. Again, still in my mind, like not realizing. He had every right to do this, by the way. And I fucking deserved it. I mean, maybe not what I'm going to go on to tell you, but I deserved him to do what he did. So he went out front and I stuck my chin out and I said, go on then, give us your best shot. And he's punched me in the face. It was bizarre because it never hit me to the floor. And I remember I went, whoa, stop. Hang on, I think you broke my jaw. I think my jaw's broke. Hang on, my jaw's broke. And then everyone was like, he's not broke your jaw, because if he's broke your jaw, you wouldn't be able to talk and all this. And I was like, no, I think it's broken. Anyway, it all sort of calmed down. And I could feel my tooth wobbling. So I remember I went in the toilets and I looked in the mirror and I realised that my tooth wasn't wobbling. What had happened was, I could see that there was a segment of my lower jaw that was not connected to the rest of my mouth. And it was moving about in my mouth. And one of the lads come in and saw it and was like, I remember him like holding his mouth and going, you need to go to hospital now. And instead of, because when you drink in the way that I drank, you're not ready to stop until you're ready to stop. And I wasn't ready to stop drinking. So I was like, I'm not going to book an ambulance. I'll get a taxi. So I booked a taxi. I bought a bottle of vodka and a bottle of Coke. And by the time I got to the hospital, I couldn't move my mouth properly. And I remember being stood outside the hospital and I'm like trying to filter this vodka into my mouth before I went into the hospital. And I went into the hospital and I remember the receptionist looked at my face and was like, we need to get you down now. They did the scan and they showed me the x-ray. My jaw had snapped here and snapped here. So that bit of my jaw was completely disconnected and it had dislocated on the left side as well. So they put me on a morphine drip, I think, or injected me with morphine anyway, because I was in a lot of pain. And then I had the realization that I had a lot of cocaine on me. And as I lay on this bed, basically they'd told me, by the way, that they need to do emergency surgery on it. And they don't have the capabilities of doing it at Blackpool Hospital. So they were transferring me to Preston Hospital. So so while I was waiting for an ambulance to come and get me, they just put me in a room, right? And I had this thought, clear as day. If I take all of that cocaine in my pocket, that'll kill me with the morphine that I've had. And I remember thinking, this is it. Finally, this is it. I wasn't sad, upset. I just thought, this is perfect. This is perfect. And I went into the little toilet that was in the room, and I put all of the cocaine, as much as I could, up my nose and in my mouth. And I remember being in the ambulance, and I remember like shaking and having, I guess it was a seizure. And I woke up the next morning. I literally, that's the last I remember. And I woke up the next morning all connected up in the hospital in Preston. They'd done the surgery on my face. So what they do is they cut your bottom lip away inside your mouth, pull it down, and there's two like Meccano bits that are holding my jaw together on this side. And they wanted to keep me in for checks and stuff like that. And I think they were concerned. They sort of like were asking me about my well-being and stuff. I thought, I fucking got to get out of here. I got to get out of here. I was so gutted that I'd woke up. And I rang the lads that we'd gone up in a minibus, and I rang them and said, where are you? I'm coming out of the hospital. And they'd gone home. They were all laughing and cheering in the minibus. They were back near Swindon. They'd fucking left me there. I remember thinking, that's my mates, I'd fucking die for you lot. And so I left the hospital, discharged myself. You have to sign a thing to discharge yourself, I think. And I bought 8 cans of Strongbow. And I had to find somewhere to buy a straw so that I could drink my cans on the way home. And I remember travelling home from there. I thought, I don't know what to do, man. They ain't my friends. I've got I felt so desperately alone, and I was alone, man. Everything was a facade. I was alone in this world. And I turned my back on the football stuff pretty much then. And then it was the 13th of May, 2012, which was the last day that I was drinking. It was the day that Aguero, for the football fans, scored the goal. Aguero! And the crowd goes crazy. It's like one of the most amazing things the Premier League's ever seen. The pub was going crazy. And I looked around and I thought, this don't work anymore. And the landlord of the pub, believe it or not, that I used to drink in was somebody who had problems with gambling and had got free from that. And he sort of said to me, look, maybe alcohol's your problem. Why don't you go to a meeting? And I had a heart-to-heart with him, and I said, yeah, all right, I'll go to a meeting, a 12-step fellowship meeting, yeah, Alcoholics Anonymous. And the next day I tried to put it off, but he pushed me and he said, yeah, let's go. And I went in this room and I was shaking. I used to violently shake. And like, if I went a couple of days without, because I would drink so much, I had sober days, and I would go on little spurts where I'd prove that I didn't have a problem with alcohol by doing a week sober or whatever. And I remember sitting in this room and I thought, this is it. My life's over, man. And I said, I am Josh and I'm an alcoholic. And the reality is I haven't touched alcohol or drugs since that day. But it's been hard, man. I was crazy. I remember I found sobriety really hard. I started going to a meeting every night. So I would go to work in the day and then I would go and sit in a meeting in the evening just to get me through the day. 1 month, 2 months. I mean, I told people I was never drinking again all the time, right? Nobody believed me. It was insane when I'd done 3 months. People were could not fucking believe it. I don't think I could. everyone's saying, wow, you're like all this time sober, and it must be amazing, and like you must feel so proud. And I felt better, physically, but I couldn't deal with life, man. Everything that I'd ever ran away from, every emotion that I'd ever used drugs and alcohol to escape was just there, and I fucking didn't know how to deal with it. I had no escape anymore, no way of getting out of my head. And I'd never tried AA properly, and AA has traditions, so I'm cautious of how I speak. Some of their traditions are not talking too much about this at a public level. But I was going to meetings and just pretending that life was brilliant. I was lying again, doing what I'd always done to fit in. And after 9 months of not drinking, I was having panic attacks. I'd never had panic attacks before. Yeah. I used to have my kids on the weekends, and I didn't know how to deal with them. So I made a decision that felt like a very honest and noble decision to not be here anymore. Because I tried everything and it hadn't worked. And I went to see my kids for what I thought would be one last time. And because I knew I was going to die, the past became irrelevant and the future was non-existent. And for the first time ever in my life, I was present with the kids in a way I'd never experienced before. I remember cuddling my daughter and feeling it. I remember going to the park and watching my son go down the slide and realizing how connected we were and how much they needed me. I'd never seen that before. As a man, I intellectually knew that I loved my kids. I could tell you all the right things. I don't think I'd ever felt it like that. And I changed my mind. And more importantly than changing my mind, I realized that what was killing me was everything I'd been running away from inside. It was never alcohol that was killing me. It was never drugs that were killing me. In fact, I would argue that both of those were keeping me alive. What was killing me was my internal wounding. And I made a promise to go on a journey to really try and be somebody different, to break the cycle. And in the 13 years that have followed, my life has changed immeasurably. I got that money. I cleared my debt. I got set up in my own place. I've gone on to remarry, and we've got 2 children, so I've got 6 kids. I've got the most amazing relationship with my children. My eldest is nearly 19 and lives with us, and I don't like to talk too much about my family publicly because they're not content. And they all have their own story to tell. And I've never been that person that posts about my life on social media, which sounds bizarre when you look at how much I share on social media, but I think one of the key things to know and understand is that I had a few years where I was flying, and I do see that in the sober, because sober communities are relatively new. There's lots of people people that are considered to have long-term sobriety are still 4, 5, 6 years sober. You're often still flying then, right? And this isn't to patronize, but you're often still flying then. So people just talk about how amazing it is. And I find life hard, man. I find life hard. I'm actually in the midst of a good patch at the moment, so I love my life. But I went from somebody who was £17,000 of debt on a fold-out bed in my mum's house now to having created the platform that I have today. I get to travel all over the world. I get to work with some of the biggest brands in the world. I get to do some of the most amazing things. There's most days now, If money didn't matter and I didn't have to earn money, I'd be doing the very same thing. And, you know, I'm very blessed. I'm very lucky to do that. But a lot of people don't make it this far. And I'm not a different person. I'm still the same person, but I've got new tools, you know, I've got a new way of living. I left my job, by the way, when I was about 6 years sober. So I was about 6 years sober. I'd worked my way up in that factory. I was transport manager by then. I fucking hated it, man. It was killing me again. And I knew, like, I'm going to fall into something bad here unless I do something. And shall I tell you this? Yeah. Through a series of events, I found Nakoa, basically. I found Nakoa and I started volunteering with them, and one thing led to another, and I realized that there was some value in what I shared and how I talked, and I was able to leave my job. I'll save that story for another day, of the in-depth version of that story. But I left my job, yeah, and, like, you know, I get to do what I do today. And the thing I love the most about my life today is being of service. I feel like I have always lived in service. Sometimes dysfunctionally, sometimes functionally. As a child, I remember seeing my mum's pain. Or seeing not just my mum's, the adults around me, and always trying to make things right, trying to make everybody else's life better. And there's times when I do that to the detriment of myself. There's times when I self-abandon to do that. But one thing that I've found along my healing journey is that that's also what I love the most. And when I can find a healthy balance of being of service to other people, trying to help build other people up, make their lives and the world a better place, then that helps me. It helps me be able to live in this world. Maybe I've never fully figured out how to do that for myself. Maybe there's a journey to go on where I figure out how to do that for myself. Maybe there's not. Maybe my reason for being on this planet is to be of service the best way that I can. The podcast is called Dysfunctional, and it's called Dysfunctional because I'm still dysfunctional. I still get twisted up and lost down rabbit holes, and like I feel things so deeply, and I see the complexities of life that sometimes feels too heavy to carry. I sometimes hurt people in my quest to try and help them. I sometimes hurt people in my quest to try and save myself. And I think we all of us to some degree live with the core wound of am I lovable? We live with the fear that if we truly present who we are, then maybe we won't be. But I love my life today. I have an incredible relationship with my children. I'm a good dad. I'm very close with my kids. They are the center of my life. They're the center of everything that I do. I'm a constant, consistent person in their life. And I come from a generation on my dad's side of people that weren't. Not all of them. I'm sure there's a good one. I don't know them all, but I was very, very nearly another number, another statistic. And I sometimes struggle today when people can hold me on a bit of a pedestal, because I think, like, don't don't hold me on a pedestal, man. I'm just trying to make my way. I'm trying to do my best. And I've said this before, but maybe I'll finish here with this, because I can feel my body saying that's enough. That's enough now. I've said this before, but I'll say it again. I don't have any pictures of my dad in my house. I don't know what to say. I mean, I tell my kids he was poorly and died when I was young. I don't have any good memories. People tell me he was a good man, but I couldn't tell you he was. Not back it up, and other than say, I'm told he was. And even those people don't give me much evidence of that. And I'd love to do some good in the world. And you know, I want to do some good. I want to leave a mark on the world. I feel like I have something that can help me do that. But my main aim, away from anything, is that whatever happens, mistakes will be made and fallouts will happen, I'm sure. But one day there'll be pictures of me on somebody's wall, and a child will say, "Who's that?" And somebody will say, "That's your granddad. And he was a good man. And he did some good things." And maybe they'll be able to tell them some stories and give them something to look up to. I've never had that. My stepdad's a great man, by the way. I look up to him for what he's done with my mum. Absolutely, I do. But and he'll say this, he's still my stepdad. I don't remember ever having a dad. I've never had a dad. I don't know what it's like to have that relationship with a man. I don't know. I'm fucking winging it as a dad myself. But I said to you before, and I'll say it again, I'm a good dad. And I believe my kids will tell you that too. And I believe that, and my eldest two are pretty much adults now. My eldest one is an adult, and the next one's about to become an adult in terms of age, turning 18. When the shit hits the fan, and when they feel like their lives feels too much, and that will happen, it happens in our life. If I'm still in this world, they'll pick up the phone and they'll phone me, and I'll be there. I'll be there. All right, we're done here. It might be the longest podcast I've ever done. But, as always, full of tears as it was, I've been Josh Connolly. And this was definitely dysfunctional. I did tell you it would be dysfunctional. So thank you for sticking around till the end here. And if you have enjoyed this podcast, then please help me to grow Dysfunctional by sharing with your friends on social media. You can find me at Josh_FFW. And then wherever you're listening to this or watching this, please make sure that you've liked and subscribed, left us a 5-star review and a comment if your platform allows it. And I'll see you on the next one.